arresting nearly 50 protesters outside of a federal building in Minneapolis as Homeland Security warns of escalating attacks on ICE agents. The senior correspondent, Steve Harrigan, live in Minneapolis with the latest from there. Steve.
Kevin, that protest out in front of the federal building in Minneapolis turned violent after protesters were told to disperse. At least 42 people were arrested when they were told they had to break it up. Many began throwing bottles and ice at the federal agents. At least one agent wounded, one patrol car smashed up, one protester arrested for assault. In the meantime here, these daily protests are really taking a toll on the local economy, especially small businesses and restaurants having a hard time. Local entrepreneurs trying to encourage people to buy local, many saying that this is worse for businesses than even COVID was.
My co-founder and I stopped by a restaurant on our street and ended up filling to-go orders for them because more than 50% of his staff is gone. Afraid to come to work for fear of being taken by ICE, even as U.S. citizens, even with work permits, even with the right paperwork.
We've lived through this before during COVID in 2020 following the murder of George Floyd, and we're living through it again, and this time it's worse.
So what's going on now is people are being arrested as the protests in Minneapolis are turning violent, and just listen to her statement. She was saying that people are scared to come to work even if they have the right documents and right paperwork, and I'm just so confused by that, because if you have all your supporting documents and everything that you need to be in the country legally, and what are you afraid of? If you're approached and you have all your stuff together, once you show that, then they're going to keep it moving. They should keep it moving, because they're looking for people, and as they say, targeted individuals, and they're basically trying to blame this as far as why their local economy is starting to suffer, which I think has more to do with people choosing to protest and not earn wages to where they can be able to come into your shops and stuff like that, with said earned wages and spend within your small businesses. So it's just one of those things, man. It's just going to definitely cripple Minneapolis's economy, and even with all these protests, I just don't even understand that why people think that this is going to get the ICE agents to leave. It's not. It's going to bring in more ICE agents or even more federal agencies into your area to try to help combat the numbers of people who are there to protest. So at this point, I would say the quickest way to get ICE out is to allow them to go ahead and complete their operation, and then they'll be moving on to the next area, the next city. But it's hard to get people to see that, because they want things to go their way, and they feel just being out there holding up fuck ICE flags and stuff like that is really being effective, and it's getting people locked up. Over 50 plus people being locked up.
700 ICE agents were pulled out on Wednesday. That still leaves 2,000 here. So far, no public timeline on when they will be leaving. Kevin, back to you.
Stay warm, or do the best you can. Steve Harrigan up in Minneapolis. Thank you, my friend. We appreciate.
Yeah, I think that's they have a little bit more.
The severity of the circumstance in Minneapolis. We're not just talking about trying to rid the homeland of individuals who have no right to be here, but have also, Chad, created havoc on this nation and on its people. That's why what's happening there is such an important storyline, even at this hour. You saw Steve there talking about the removal of some of these protesters. That seems to be a bit of a shift, or maybe a bit of tightening on their policy, and it seems to be working. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the ongoing violent protest, you just reported you had 40 individuals arrested because of that violence. I think this is a real problem for Minneapolis and for those Democratic leaders there, because what they have been telling the American people is that those protests are peaceful, and that if ICE withdraws, then some of that protest and some of the violence, I should say, can abate, and it doesn't seem to be the case. So what we need now is we need the leadership of the Democratic Party to come out and start saying, stop with the violent protesting, stop with the violence there in Minneapolis, because, as Tom Homan has said, if the violence subsides, then they can draw down even more resources there in Minneapolis, which is what those leaders want. But if that violence continues, as we see, that the numbers aren't going to dwindle. In fact, they're likely to go up because you need to protect those officers. So now is the time that you need Democratic leaders to say enough is enough. We're going to send in the police. We're going to arrest the violent protesters immediately. We're going to hold them accountable. And now is the time for them to start speaking out.
I mean, these people are just mortars, for the Democrats that are running that city and that state. They don't care about these people. That's just the reality that you have to come to. These people going out, some of them are going out to be peaceful, but then some of them have a battery in their back to where they're trying to get violent. And as he was just saying, the more violent that it gets, the more numbers that are going to come to your area. It's a losing battle. And you'd rather be out there with your face down, planted into snow, into the pavement, getting zip tied, versus, using your vote. And also, I mean, of course, you want to use your voice, man. I'm not against people protesting for the right reasons, but violent protests are a whole different thing. Nothing says that you have to, go out and be violent within your protests and stuff like that. But, the longer that you protest, the longer that ICE is going to be there, the more numbers that they're going to, send to this area. And, they're not going to back down. I mean, they've been given direct orders from this administration to do exactly what they're doing. And, I mean, they're not going to just back down. Because if they back down, that's going to send a clear message that, we can protest for days and months, and eventually, they're going to tuck their tails and run. But they're there for a reason. And, a lot of this is really impeding on that reason, which I feel like they're more than likely, they could have already been out of Minneapolis at this point, because this has been going on for months now.
Is this a federal law circumstance? Because I think the concern from some, Chad, would be you're going to arrest these guys. They're just going to be back out on the streets in a couple of hours.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's going to be prosecuted at the local level for the most part, unless, you've got federal law enforcement and prosecutors that want to weigh in. It depends on the types of things that they are being arrested for. If they're assaulting federal officers, obviously a federal prosecutor can get involved. If they're doing other things that are more locally based, then some of the local prosecutors will eventually prosecute that. But the concern is, yes, absolutely, they go in jail and then they just simply get out in a matter of hours. I think that is the concern. And so you need the Trump administration weighing in with the local leaders, talking to the governor, talking to the mayor, and talking to others to say, look, we're doing our part. We've withdrawn some ICE assets here because we told you if the violence starts to diminish, we can remove even more. But if the violence stays the same or is increasing, that's a real problem for the leaders there in Minneapolis.
Yeah, so don't think we need to harp on this too much more. This has been something that's been in the news for months, like I was saying, and at some point, hopefully the leadership there will tell these people, hey, we just need to step out of the way, let ICE do what they've been directed to do here, and and eventually they'll wind all the numbers down to where ICE isn't going to be they're in large numbers as they are now. They have thousands of ICE agents in this area, conducting this operation. And, we don't want to see it to the point where they have to bring in any other type of, federal agents or military to this situation. But let me know how you guys feel about this whole thing. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. This is Justin Paul. Peace.